Nobody sat you down and taught you about money. Nobody explained compound interest when you were 12. Nobody showed you how to read a pay stub, how credit scores work, how to negotiate a salary, how to build wealth from nothing. Nobody talked about any of it. And the silence, that specific heavy, unspoken silence around money in your household, taught you more than any conversation could have. It taught you that money is something you do not talk about, something shameful, something complicated and dangerous and better left unexamined. It taught you that financial confusion is normal, that not knowing is just the way it is for people like us. And you carried that lesson into adulthood, into every financial decision. Every missed opportunity, every moment of confusion and avoidance, without ever knowing that the lesson itself was the problem. Today I want to talk about the silence, what it was really made of, what it actually taught you, and what becomes possible when you finally break it. Because here is what most people never understand about financial education. The most powerful financial education you ever received was not in a classroom. It was not in a book, it was in the atmosphere of your home. In the way your parents reacted when a bill arrived. In the expression on your mother's face at the grocery store when the total came up higher than she expected. In the conversations that stopped the moment you walked into the room. In the things that were never said, and in what the not saying communicated louder than words ever could. Children are extraordinarily sensitive to the emotional temperature of the adults around them. They do not need explicit instruction to learn what something means. They read the body language, they absorb the tension. They feel the fear even when the fear has no name, even when no one has said out loud that they are afraid. And what millions of children learned in households across America from the silence around money was a set of beliefs so deeply embedded they never registered as beliefs at all. They registered as reality. Money is scary, talking about money is dangerous. We do not have enough and we never will. Financial confusion is inherited, it is just who we are. Wanting more is greedy, hoping for better is naive. These are not small beliefs. These are the operating system on which an entire financial life runs. And for most people, they were installed before the age of 10. Before there was any capacity to evaluate them critically. Before there was any framework to understand that they were beliefs rather than facts. Let me introduce you to a concept called financial socialization. It is the process through which children learn about money, not from formal education, but from the financial behaviors, attitudes, and emotional responses they observe in the adults around them. Researchers Dr. Sharon Daines and Dr. Tahira Hira spent decades studying this process. Their findings are sobering. The vast majority of adult financial behavior, both the functional and the dysfunctional, can be traced back to what was modeled in the childhood home. Not what was taught, what was modeled. The difference is critical. Teaching is conscious and deliberate, modeling is constant and invisible. And modeling is far more powerful, because the brain learns far more from what it observes repeatedly than from what it is told once. Your parents may have told you to save money. But if they spent impulsively, if the savings never materialized, if money always seemed to disappear no matter how much came in, your brain learned from the behavior. Not the instruction, and the behavior said money is not something that stays. Money is something that passes through, and trying to hold on to it is an exercise in futility. This is one of the most common and most devastating lessons that financial silence teaches. Not through words, through demonstration. Now I want to talk about something even more specific. The particular damage done by shame, because in many households the silence around money was not neutral. It was loaded with shame, the shame of not having enough, the shame of debt. The shame of wanting things that felt out of reach. The shame of looking at neighbors, colleagues, relatives, and feeling the gap between their lives and yours as a personal failure. That shame was in the silence, and children absorbed it. They learned that financial struggle is not just difficult, it is embarrassing. Something to hide, something that reflects on your worth as a person. And shame, as any psychologist will tell you, is one of the most powerful drivers of avoidance in human behavior. When something is associated with shame, we do not engage with it. We do not examine it, we do not talk about it, we do not make clear-eyed decisions about it. We hide from it. And hiding from your financial reality, which is exactly what financial shame produces, is one of the most reliable ways to ensure that reality never improves. Because you cannot change what you refuse to see, and shame makes seeing feel impossible. This is the direct line between the silence in your childhood home and the avoidance patterns in your adult life. The silence taught you that money is something to hide from, and you have been hiding ever since. Let me tell you about a man named David. David is 36 years old. He has never, not once in his adult life, sat down and looked honestly at his complete financial picture. He knows roughly what he earns, he has a general sense of his debt. But the full picture, every account, every balance, every dollar owed and every dollar owned, he has never assembled it. Because assembling it feels like opening a door, he is not sure he can handle what is behind. When asked where this fear comes from, he thinks back to his childhood, to the way his parents' faces changed when money was discussed, to the one time he asked his father how much they had in savings, and the look his father gave him. Not angry, something worse, ashamed, as if the question itself had exposed something that was supposed to stay hidden. David learned in that moment that the full financial picture is not something you look at directly. You approach it sideways, you manage it at the edges. You deal with the emergencies and ignore the underlying reality. And 30 years later, he is still doing exactly that, not because he chose to. Because it was modeled, because the silence taught him that this is how you survive money by not looking at it too closely. The tragedy is not just what David does not know about his finances. The tragedy is that he does not know why he does not know. He has spent 36 years operating from a financial program he never consented to, without ever understanding where the program came from or that it was even running. That is what the silence does. It does not just leave gaps in knowledge. It fills those gaps with fear, and fear in the absence of understanding shapes everything. So what does it take to break the silence? Not just to start talking about money, but to genuinely interrupt the patterns that the silence installed. The first thing I want to say is that this is not primarily an information problem. Yes, there are things you were never taught. Yes, there are financial concepts and skills that your household never gave you access to. And yes, acquiring that knowledge matters, but knowledge alone will not undo what the silence built. Because what the silence built was not ignorance, it was a relationship. A deeply emotional, nervously charged, shame-laden relationship with money that causes avoidance, fear, and self-defeating behavior regardless of how much information is layered on top. You can know exactly what compound interest is and still never open an investment account, because opening it requires sitting with the financial reality you have been hiding from. You can understand the importance of budgeting and still never make one, because making one means looking directly at the numbers you have spent years carefully not looking at. The information is not the barrier, the relationship is the barrier. And changing the relationship requires going back to where it was formed. Not to relive it, not to blame anyone, but to see it clearly for the first time, as an adult with the capacity to understand what happened and why. This is what I mean when I say that the path to financial change is more psychological than financial. It requires the courage to look at the emotional environment that shaped your financial identity and to say, clearly and without shame, this is what I was given, this is what it taught me, and this is where it stops. The second thing I want to address is the guilt that often comes up when people start to do this work. The guilt of seeing clearly what your parents did not give you. The guilt of recognizing that the silence hurt you when the people who were silent loved you and did their best. Both things are true. Your parents loved you and did the best they could with what they had. And the silence created real damage that you are still navigating. These are not contradictory truths, they coexist. And being able to hold both of them without collapsing into blame or collapsing into excuse is one of the most psychologically sophisticated things a person can do. It is also the foundation of genuine healing, because healing does not require anyone to be the villain. It just requires honesty, honest acknowledgement of what happened, honest understanding of its effects, and an honest choice made not in anger or resentment, but in clarity to do something different. Now let me give you 3 practices that specifically address the damage done by financial silence. The first practice is called breaking the silence with yourself. Before you can talk about money with anyone else, before you can build new financial habits, you need to have one honest conversation with yourself. Set aside 30 minutes, no phone, no distractions, a piece of paper in front of you. And write the answers to these questions. What did money feel like in my childhood home? What did the adults around me believe about money? Not what did they say, what did their behavior reveal? What did the silence teach me? What am I afraid I will find if I look at my finances honestly? Do not rush the answers, do not edit them. Write what is actually true, not what sounds reasonable. This conversation, the one you have been avoiding your entire adult life, is the beginning of everything. Because the silence cannot continue once you have named it. And naming it, seeing it clearly in your own words, removes some of its power. Not all of it, but some, and some is enough to take the next step. The second practice is the full picture sit. Choose a date, not someday, a specific date within the next 7 days. And on that date, for 60 minutes, you are going to assemble your complete financial picture. Every account, every balance, every debt, every dollar owed, and every dollar owned. You are not going to fix anything, you are not going to make decisions. You are just going to look clearly, completely, without running. This is the practice that David, the man I told you about earlier, has never been able to do. Not because he lacks intelligence, but because no one ever showed him that looking is survivable. That the numbers, however difficult, are just information, data to be worked with. Not a verdict on his worth, not a reflection of his character. Not the confirmation of every shame the silence ever produced, just numbers. And numbers can be changed. The third practice is the generational break letter. This is the most powerful and the most personal of the three. I want you to write a letter not to your parents, not to anyone else, to yourself. A letter that begins with these words: "In my family, money was never talked about. And the silence taught me these things." Write everything the silence taught you. Every belief, every fear, every assumption that was installed in the years before you had the capacity to question it. Then write this: "But I am the one who breaks this, not because my family was wrong to be afraid. Not because I am better than them, but because I came later. Because I have tools they did not have, because I can see what they could not see. And because the silence ends with me." Write that letter, read it every week. Not as an affirmation, as a declaration of a new inheritance, one that you are choosing for yourself and for everyone who will come after you. Here is what I want you to carry from this video: the silence was not your fault. You did not ask for it, you did not deserve it. It was the best that the people who loved you could offer, given their own wounds, their own fears, their own inherited silences from the generations before them. And it shaped you deeply in ways you are still discovering. But here is what is also true: the shaping is not permanent. The silence can be broken, the patterns can be interrupted. The financial identity that was built in the absence of knowledge and safety can be rebuilt slowly. Honestly, imperfectly, in the presence of understanding. You have that understanding now, more than you had before you pressed play on this video. And understanding, even a small amount of it, changes what is possible. Not everything, not overnight, but something real, something that was not possible before. Use it, take the next step, and then the one after that. If this video named something you have been carrying, if it finally gave words to a silence you have lived inside for as long as you can remember, comment the word spoken below. Because you just broke the silence right here, and that matters more than you might know. Hit the like button as an act of commitment to yourself and your future. And subscribe, because this is what we do here. We have the conversations that were never had. We go to the places that most content is afraid to go. And we do it with honesty, with depth, and with the respect you deserve. The silence is over. What comes next is yours to write.